At my graduation, my mom stood up and said, "You didn't deserve that degree." The room went silent. People looked away. My heart dropped. Then Dean Rourke walked up, handed me a second envelope and said, "Read this out loud." I opened it, hands shaking. Full scholarship to Oxford. My mom turned pale. The crowd stared, and for the first time I didn't shrink. I stood taller. My name is Amira Langston, and for as long as I can remember, I've been fighting for something most people take for granted: my mother's approval. I grew up in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Newark, New Jersey. My mom, Geneva Langston, worked 2 jobs, kept the house spotless, and expected nothing less than perfection from me. If I got a 95 on a test, she asked where the other 5 points went. If I came home excited about winning a writing contest, she barely looked up from her paperwork. "Good," she'd say without emotion. "That's what you're supposed to do." I used to think she was just strict. But as I got older, I realized it wasn't about discipline, it was about control. Nothing I did was ever enough, and slowly, that started to shape the way I saw myself. I stopped celebrating small wins. I stopped expecting praise. Instead, I worked quietly, stayed late at school, and drowned myself in books. I found comfort in things I could control: my grades, my schedule, my goals. While other kids had dinner with their parents, I had microwave meals in silence. My dad left before I was old enough to know his voice. Mom never talked about him, and I learned not to ask. Still, I wanted to make her proud. That's what drove me, even when it hurt. When I got into university, it wasn't just a dream, it was my way out. I chose a school hours away from home and paid my own way with scholarships, part-time jobs, and every cent I could save. I worked at the campus library, tutored other students in writing, and sometimes skipped meals just to make tuition. I was exhausted, but determined. I knew I had something to prove. In class, I found something I'd never really felt before: encouragement. Professors noticed me, classmates respected me, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I wasn't the girl trying to impress anyone. I was just a student who worked hard and cared deeply. I spent nights in the library, reading about post-colonial literature, identity theory, and women's narratives. It wasn't just about graduating. It was about building a future where I didn't have to live in anyone's shadow. Still, no matter how far I came, there was always this small part of me that wished my mother would one day say, "I'm proud of you." She didn't come to visit during those 4 years. Not once. I sent her emails, texts, updates when I got awards or made the dean's list. Most of the time, she didn't reply. When she did, it was short. "Good. Keep going." Graduation day felt like it could be the turning point. I was graduating top of my class. With honors, I was selected to give the student address. My advisor, Dean Elise Rourke, had become like a mentor to me. She said she'd never seen a student balance so much with so little support. I invited my mom, even though part of me didn't believe she'd show up. But she did. She arrived alone, dressed in a stiff black blazer, standing straight and expressionless in the back row. I spotted her just before I gave my speech. My stomach twisted. I had imagined this moment so many times, what I'd say, how she'd react. Maybe she'd cry, maybe she'd smile, maybe she'd finally tell me I'd done something right. Instead, she sat silently through the entire ceremony, not clapping once, not standing when my name was called. Still, I kept hoping. After the ceremony, the graduates were led into a reception hall filled with balloons, music, and light refreshments. I was still buzzing with adrenaline when Dean Rourke handed me an envelope labeled Honors Distinction. She smiled and told me how proud she was. My heart swelled. I turned, looking for my mom, hoping maybe this was the moment she'd say something kind. And that's when it happened. She stepped forward loud enough for everyone to hear and said, "You didn't deserve that degree." Her voice cut through everything. Conversations, laughter, even the music. I remember people stopping mid-sentence, heads turned. A few guests looked away. Some glanced at me with pity. Others just stood frozen. I stood there, still holding the envelope, my entire body stiff. I felt like I'd been slapped in front of the world. That little girl inside me, the one who still wanted her mom to clap, to smile, to say, "You did it," started to disappear. But something else, something stronger, was waking up. The silence after my mother's words wasn't just uncomfortable, it was suffocating. People didn't know where to look. Some turned away. Others gave me awkward half smiles before pretending to check their phones. I stood in the center of it all, diploma in one hand, honor letter in the other, heart racing in my chest. I didn't say anything back. I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my throat tight. I was humiliated. Geneva, my mother, showed no emotion. Her face was stone. She crossed her arms like she was proud of what she'd said. No regret, no shame. Just cold, quiet disapproval, like she'd done me a favor by telling me the truth in front of a room full of strangers. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. But I didn't move. My feet were locked in place. Maya was the first to react. She came up beside me, grabbed my hand, and whispered, "Don't let her ruin this." But even Maya's voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. I looked at Dean Rourke, who was still standing by the podium. She had heard everything. Our eyes met for a brief second. She gave me a small, steady nod, almost like she was saying, "I see you. Don't shrink." It gave me just enough strength to stay upright. My mother started walking away, not leaving the hall entirely, but taking a few steps toward the side of the room where the crowd was thinning out. I could hear murmurs, see people whispering to one another. A few avoided eye contact. One of my professors, Dr. Levin, gave me a sympathetic glance and mouthed, "I'm sorry." That hurt the most. The look of pity. I had worked 4 years for this moment. No shortcuts, no handouts, no favors. I put in the late nights, the tears, the doubts. I survived on ramen and coffee, juggled jobs and exams, fought through panic attacks alone. And in a single sentence, my mother had made it look like all of that was nothing. I knew she didn't believe in praise. She thought compliments made people weak. But part of me had always hoped that, deep down, she cared. That underneath the criticism and distance, there was love. Now I wasn't so sure. Maya guided me toward the refreshment table. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to sit down. Uncle Drew showed up a minute later. He looked panicked and awkward, running his hand through his thinning hair. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he said. I didn't think she'd say something like that. Not here. Not now. I stared at him. "But you knew she thought it." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "She's just hard. She's always been hard on you." I shook my head. That wasn't hard. That was cruel. The reception moved on without me. People were laughing again, taking pictures in their gowns, lining up for cupcakes and punch. I sat quietly at the edge of the room, staring at my honor letter, wondering how it had turned into something I no longer felt proud of. Geneva stood near the back, speaking to a parent I didn't recognize. She wasn't leaving. She didn't look embarrassed. Then Dean Rourke approached me. Her heels clicked softly as she crossed the room. She had a second envelope in her hand, this one thicker, more formal, with my name printed in bold. She looked calm, but her eyes held something fierce, something protective. "I wanted to give this to you after the reception," she said, "but now feels like the better time." I looked up at her, confused. "What is it?" She handed me the envelope. "Open it when you're ready. And when you do, read it out loud." I hesitated. "Out loud?" She smiled gently. "Yes, let the room hear it." Maya leaned in. "You okay?" I stared at the envelope, heart pounding again, but for a different reason this time. I didn't know what was inside, but something told me it mattered. Around us, the noise had picked back up, but I could feel something shifting inside me. A choice. I could crumble, walk out, and let my mother win. Or I could stand up and let people see the truth. Not about her, but about me. Because I wasn't just a girl with a degree. I was a woman who had earned every single line on that paper. And maybe, just maybe, this letter was about to prove that to everyone, especially to myself. I sat there for a moment, just staring at the envelope Dean Rourke had handed me. It was heavier than the first one, thicker paper. My name was printed in clean black ink across the front. No school logo, just my name. Amira Langston. I ran my thumb over the edge, trying to calm the shake in my fingers. Around me, the noise of the room faded in and out like static. My ears were hot. My heart was loud. "You okay?" Maya asked gently. She was kneeling beside my chair now, eyes full of concern but not pity. That mattered. I don't know, I whispered. What if it's bad? Maya tilted her head. Bad? Dean Rourke literally handed it to you herself. Does she strike you as someone who'd humiliate you twice in one day? I let out a dry laugh. Small but real. Maya had a point. Dean Rourke wasn't careless. She was intentional. Always. The way she had looked at me, the calm, the confidence. It didn't feel like a warning. It felt like an invitation. I looked across the room. Geneva was still standing near the back, drink in hand, chatting quietly with someone. She hadn't looked at me once since making her little announcement. She dropped her bomb and moved on, like nothing had happened. I felt the heat rise in my chest again, not just from pain this time, but from something stronger. A flicker of power. I stood up. Maya stood with me, quickly brushing crumbs off her lap like she was ready to go to war. I clutched the envelope tightly in one hand and walked back toward the center of the room, toward the open space near the podium. I didn't ask permission. I didn't wait for anyone to quiet down. I just raised the envelope in the air and said, "Dean Rourke asked me to read this out loud." A few heads turned, then more. The room didn't go silent immediately, but the sound began to thin. Conversations faded. People stopped mid-bite, mid-sentence, turning toward me. I could feel all of it. Eyes, energy, tension. But this time, I didn't feel like hiding. I opened the envelope slowly, carefully, like it was something sacred. Inside was a formal-looking letter with a gold emblem at the top. My breath caught when I saw the first line. I looked up, then down again. My voice came out a little shaky at first, but I kept going. Dear Amira Langston, it is with great pleasure that we offer you a full postgraduate scholarship to the University of Oxford in recognition of your outstanding academic achievements, leadership, and resilience. There was a pause, like the room hadn't quite processed what I'd just said. Then it happened. Everything went still. People froze in place. A girl across the room gasped softly. A faculty member's eyebrows shot up. My classmates stared wide-eyed. And finally, my mother looked at me. She didn't say a word, but her face changed. The color drained from it. Her mouth parted barely. She blinked slowly like her body had short-circuited and didn't know how to catch up. I kept reading. Your personal story, academic excellence, and determination stood out from hundreds of applicants around the world. We look forward to welcoming you to Oxford's graduate program in English literature this fall. I lowered the letter. I wasn't trembling anymore. My arms felt strong. My voice had steadied. For the first time in a very long time, I felt taller than her. Dean Rourke stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. You've earned every word of that letter, she said, and you deserve every opportunity it represents. People began clapping, not politely, but fully. Loud, proud applause echoed through the room. My professor stood. Some of my classmates cheered. A few parents even joined in. I stood in the center of it, no longer hidden in the background of my own success story. Maya threw her arms around me. You did it, she whispered. I'm so freaking proud of you. My eyes welled up, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Not there. I looked over at Geneva one last time. She was still staring, lips pressed together, frozen in place. And for once, I didn't care what she thought. Her opinion had lost its grip on me. This wasn't about what she saw, it was about what I finally saw in myself. That moment wasn't just a turning point. It was the beginning of everything I'd been waiting for. The applause didn't stop for a while. It filled every corner of the room, not like background noise, but like a force, like a storm that had broken open the silence my mother had wrapped around me for years. I stood in the middle of it, holding the Oxford letter in one hand and my degree in the other, and for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I had already done it. Dean Rourke didn't leave my side. Her hand on my shoulder wasn't just a gesture of support. It was a message, a quiet, powerful statement that said, "This is your space. You belong here." I looked around the room and saw my professors smiling. Dr. Levin raised his glass toward me. A few of my classmates mouthed congratulations. Some parents nodded with pride as if they knew me, as if I were one of their own. Even the janitor, Mr. Pierce, the one who had always given me encouraging thumbs-ups during late-night study sessions, stood near the back, clapping with both hands, tears in his eyes. It was overwhelming, but in the best way, like the world had tilted slightly back into place after years of leaning the wrong direction. And then my eyes met Geneva's. She was still standing at the edge of the room, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her expression was unreadable at first. She wasn't clapping, she wasn't smiling, but for the first time ever, she wasn't speaking either. No judgment, no correction, no criticism, just silence. And that silence said more than all her words ever had. I didn't expect her to clap. I didn't need her to. But something inside her had shifted. I saw it. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was regret. Or maybe, just maybe, she realized she'd been wrong, not just about the scholarship, but about me. Maya pulled me in for another hug. I knew you had something huge in the works, she said, laughing through happy tears. Oxford? You're gonna need a passport, girl. I laughed too, this time fully from my chest. It felt good, light, real. As the crowd began to settle, people approached me one by one, some to shake my hand, others to say how inspired they were. A mother told me she hoped her daughter would grow up with the same drive. A classmate admitted he'd always been intimidated by how focused I was, and now he understood why. That was the beauty of the moment. People finally saw the whole story, not just the grades or the awards, but the person behind them, the one who studied through pain, who succeeded in silence, who didn't have a cheering section for most of her life, but still crossed the finish line. Uncle Drew finally made his way through the crowd. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in an hour, eyes soft, shoulders sagged. I didn't know, he said quietly. About Oxford, about all this. I nodded. I didn't tell anyone. He looked down for a second, then said, I'm proud of you. I should have said that before. I should have said it years ago. His voice cracked, and I believed him. Thank you, I said. And I meant that too. Geneva still hadn't moved. I thought about going to her, about giving her the chance to say something, but then I stopped myself, because this day wasn't about her. It never really had been. It was about what I had survived, what I had built, and what came next. I turned away from her and toward the people who had chosen to be proud of me. Dean Rourke leaned in one last time. You've rewritten your story today, Amira, and I hope you never let anyone else hold the pen again. That line stayed with me long after the party ended. As the sun started to set and the hall began to clear, I stood at the edge of the stage, looking out over the rows of empty chairs. The same chairs that, only hours earlier, had held people I thought I needed approval from. Now, they were just seats. What mattered was me, standing here whole. Tomorrow I would start the paperwork for my visa. Next month, I'd be packing for England. And the next chapter of my life wouldn't be defined by silence or shame. It would be written in my voice, with my hands, and on my terms. And this time, I'd be the only one holding the pen. The morning after graduation, I woke up early. The sun was pouring in through the blinds, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. I just felt free. I lay there for a few quiet minutes, thinking about everything that had happened the day before. My mom's words, the Oxford letter, the crowd's reaction, and the way my voice didn't shake when I read it out loud. There was a peace in my chest I hadn't felt before. Not joy exactly, but something stronger, like I had finally reclaimed my own name. That morning, I started filling out my passport renewal application. I researched flights. I emailed the Oxford admissions contact listed in the letter. The woman replied within an hour, welcoming me to the graduate program and offering to help with next steps. Her email ended with, "You come highly recommended by Dean Rourke. We're excited to have you." That sentence made me pause. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it reminded me that someone had been in my corner the whole time. Dean Rourke saw me for more than my grades. She saw the person behind the work, the one I had kept hidden even from myself. Over the next few weeks, I started packing up my apartment. I sold the worn couch I'd studied on for years and boxed up all the notebooks filled with ideas and essays. Maya came over almost every night to help, and we'd laugh at how much stuff I'd collected that I didn't even need. She looked at me one night, after we packed the last of my books, and said, "You're not just leaving Jersey, Amira. You're leaving the version of you that thought she wasn't enough." She was right. My mom didn't reach out after graduation. No calls, no texts, not even a question about Oxford. But it didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It was disappointing, yes, but not devastating. I had finally let go of the idea that one day she'd show up with an apology or some overdue praise. I didn't need it anymore, because for the first time, I believed in myself without her permission. Uncle Drew did call. He apologized again. He said he should have stood up to her sooner. I told him I appreciated it, and I did. But I also told him I hoped he would start speaking up, not just for me, but for himself. His voice mattered too. A few of my professors sent letters of recommendation to Oxford on my behalf. Dr. Levin even said he'd love to visit if he ever made it to England. I printed those emails and saved them in a folder, not because I needed the proof, but because they were reminders that people had seen my work, supported it, and believed it deserved to be taken further. When the day came to board the flight, Maya drove me to the airport. As we hugged goodbye, she said, "When you're standing in those stone halls at Oxford, remember this moment. This is where you launched." I smiled and said, "This is where I let go." As the plane took off, I stared out the window at the skyline below. Newark got smaller and smaller, but I didn't feel like I was leaving home. I felt like I was moving toward it. Oxford was everything I imagined and more. Old libraries, students from every corner of the world, professors who challenged me in new ways. But what made it magical wasn't the history or the buildings. It was how I showed up. Confident, prepared, unapologetic. People often ask me if I regret inviting my mom to graduation. I don't. Her words exposed something I needed to face, that I was still waiting for approval from someone who was never going to give it. And that moment, painful as it was, set me free. Here's what I've learned. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need one person to start, and that person should be you. The truth is, you can do everything right, work your heart out, and still be overlooked by the people you love most. But that doesn't mean your work is any less worthy. That doesn't make you less brilliant. It just means their vision was too small to hold your light. So light it anyway. Burn bright. Burn steady. Burn in the direction of everything they said you couldn't have. Because when you stop chasing approval and start standing in your own truth, there's not a single person on this planet who can take that from you. And that is what I carried with me, not just to Oxford, but into every room I've walked into since.